latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Yay, they finally did it. The CTU and Chicago School Board reached an agreement. $1.5 billion, 4-year contract. What they got: smaller class sizes, librarians and nurses at every school, even for a school that has less population than the student-teacher population. Bilingual staff has doubled. 12 weeks of paternal leave. So, Chris, if your wife had a baby, you could take off.
Or if I had one, men can get pregnant.
That's right. Men could get pap smears, according to our Illinois Republican leader, Tony McCumbee, because that makes zero sense. Ugh, don't get me started. Infertility treatments, extra prep time for elementary teachers, 4% increase your first year for first-time teachers, and much more if you're tenured at CPS. So $1.5 billion. And for what? What are the reading levels? What are the math levels? With more on that, let's welcome back to the program our good friend, Paul Vallas, policy advisor for IllinoisPolicy.org, former candidate for mayor and former CEO of CPS. Good morning, Mr. Vallas. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what do you make of this contract? I mean, we knew they were going to cave because Brandon Johnson, as he has told us repeatedly, is a former CPS teacher who actually is still with CPS. He's just on leave right now.
Yeah. Brandon was a teacher for 4 years at an elementary school, incidentally, that I built, the Jenner School. And then, of course, lasted a single year at Westinghouse. Of course, Stacey Davis Gates, I think, lasted only 6 years as teachers. So the city is effectively really being run by two failed teachers. So that's what they do. When you can't make it in the classroom, you become a union organizer. So, so this constant reference to I'm a teacher and I know the classroom and things like that. Look, this is a terrible contract for children, and it's a terrible contract for taxpayers. I'll tell you why it's a terrible contract for children. Because it really doesn't do anything to hold teachers, schools, or even the students themselves accountable. They've abandoned standards. They've returned to social promotion. They have now stopped ranking schools based on academic performance. They're constantly demonizing testing. So they want no accountability. And, of course, they're trying to close the magnet schools because the magnet schools offer an embarrassing contrast with the neighborhood schools. So this is and the contract itself continues to work to destroy public school charters, which for Black children and Latino children, low-income children, are the only alternative to their failing schools. They cap charters. They're now renewing them every 2 years, which means it's impossible for those charters to have any sort of stability. You saw what they did with the Acero charter when they organized the charter teachers, and then they immediately struck, and the test scores plummeted. I mean, it's just so on the one hand, they're degrading the quality of the schools, and then on the other hand, they're blocking children, particularly poor children, overwhelmingly Black and Latino, from having any alternative to their failing school.
Well, here's Mayor Johnson once the CTU contract was approved.
This contract does reflect the values that I ran on and what the people of Chicago expected from my administration.
So he's claiming victory, obviously, but what are the actual numbers when it comes to reading and math proficiency at CPS?
Well, in aggregate, only barely a third of the children are reading at grade level. Barely a sixth of the children are computing at grade level. And among Black students, the test scores are far lower. Now, of course, they brag about record graduation rates, but they're simply promoting children to the next level, regardless of whether or not they're academically prepared. And look, when he talks about the values, this contract solely advances the interests of the teachers union. It gives them a pay increase, and as you pointed out, it's between four. I think veteran teachers get a slightly higher pay increase. But remember, that's in addition to the step increases, the longevity increases. Oh. So for the majority of the teachers, every year, their pay is going to go up twice that amount. It adds more Chicago Teacher Union employees. And before the contract was approved, Amy, they had They already had one employee for every 7.6 kids. They have 22,000 non-teaching employees in the Chicago public schools. And, of course, it continues to really remove standards altogether. So it's a terrible contract, and it's going to cost taxpayers about $1.5 billion, which means not only school property taxes are going to rise, again, every year to the max, but the city's going to have to provide even more, even greater subsidies to the schools, which means city property taxes are going to go up too.
Well, what about the teacher's pension? I mean, who owes who for what, and what's that all about?
Well, right now there's a fixed property tax levy that taxpayers pay in order to satisfy a part of the teacher pension obligation. In terms of new pension obligations, that's picked up by the state. So this contract really has nothing to do with the pensions. It's not like additional school district money is being diverted to pensions. This contract, pure and simple, is a $1.5 billion handout to the Chicago Teachers Union, a handout that is going to do nothing to improve the quality of a school system that is already spending $30,000 per student.
Paul Vallas, it's Chris, and I wanted to ask you a few things here. Okay, so looking at this analysis of the CTU's new contract, continued abandon of standards and accountability, moving to a soft scoring assessment system. So, in other words, it's much easier to look better with soft scoring. They don't want you to know the results, the ratings, the scores. Unlike almost every business or non-business out there, no results to be known. Despite the dramatic drop in student proficiency scores, CTU walkouts, and union-forced remote learning, CPS teachers were evaluated as excellent and proficient at a rate of 99%, a rise from 98% in 2020, and yet they was at 91% as excellent or proficient in pre-COVID and 85% in 2018. So their results go higher and higher from BS. The scoring, the soft scoring on it makes it look better. And then look at this: they killed the Invest in Kids tax credit private school scholarship program. They have robbed 15,000 pupils around the state, left stranded without scholarships. A lot of these kids going to multiple private schools that were closed completely. A lot of them are black and brown kids. This is a civil rights issue. They're stripping them from schools. They're stripping away the ability to gauge their performance, and they're giving themselves higher and higher reviews. What am I missing?
Absolutely. You know, you know how they like to throw words around like inequity or institutional racism or apartheid? Well, the Chicago Teachers Union is perpetuating an apartheid school system, because if you are from a low-income family, and the overwhelming vast majority of children who go to the Chicago public schools are black and Latino, you are in effect stuck in a failing school.
Correct.
With few any alternatives. The CTU does not, it's literally holding these teachers hostage. And this contract simply perpetuates it. And let me tell you some of the other things about saying, oh, well, now we have a librarian or a social worker. They have one employee for every 7.6 kids. They have 7,500 employees who are not even in the schools. They have 22,000 non-teaching employees. Why isn't there a librarian in every school? Why don't they have lower class sizes? Amy, only 54% of the money that the school district collects actually finds its way into the local schools. So this is highway robbery, and it is going to cost taxpayers while doing even more serious damage to Chicago's economy, because they are constantly graduating from their high schools students that are not prepared for college in increasing numbers, and students that are not prepared for the work world.
No, I've seen it firsthand. A PE teacher pass people because he was told by the principal to do that. I mean, it's just sickening. So where is the money going? Does they always say follow the money, but who's cashing in on this?
Well, look, the central regional offices and district-wide programs and the contracts for non-education related services, as I mentioned, and this is not unique to Chicago. You can look at suburban districts, and on the average, maybe 65% of the money actually finds its way into the classroom. It's far worse in Chicago. But the money is really going to perpetuate what has really become a political machine. I mean, the Chicago Teachers Union is now a political organization. And look, the mayor is bragging that, this is the first time in 15 years we haven't had a strike or a threat of strike. Well, let me tell you, it was your leadership, the leadership of the core caucus, which is the current union leadership, Stacey Davis Gates. They're the ones who, over the last 12 years, struck 5 times. You remember, Amy, during COVID, where they walked off the job 3 times to keep schools closed for 78 straight weeks. Including about a year longer than other schools remained closed, because it was very clear after the COVID summer that the students were not being, or faculty were not being in any way adversely impacted by COVID in the schools, that in many respects the schools were the safest place. So This is just I believe that this is just a disaster. This is highway robbery.
Catholics weren't dropping dead. Remember that back then? And then remember when the CTU lied and told 2 4th or 5th grade girls that they brought COVID home and killed their mothers? Remember that? I remember that because I called the ME almost on a daily basis and waited for the autopsy results. One never even had COVID. She drank herself to death, and the other one died with COVID. But she had severe hypertension, didn't get vaccinated, was going out all the time.
Amy, if you remember, during COVID, I guest hosted on a number of occasions, and we talked about this on a number of occasions. And in fact, when I met with, during the campaign, when I met with Governor Pritzker, he spent most of the time, talking about the criticism of his COVID handlings that I had made on your show.
Thin-skinned.
Exactly, which was the most bizarre thing ever. You would think that you actually pay somebody to monitor your show on a daily basis. I swear to God, they had this long notepad. It was the most bizarre thing. We didn't talk about the CTA. We didn't talk about schools. We didn't talk about economic development. We didn't talk about crime. No, we talked about me smirking when you said something critical about their COVID mitigation. So at the end of the day, these are really not serious people, and this is just more of the same, and the city is really going to suffer for it. And I have to tell you this, too. People do not realize the devastating impact that the school closings for 78 straight weeks and the district's failure to set up recovery programs to bring these kids back have had on rising crime. Because the spike in crime post-COVID can be laid at the feet of the teachers union and the shutting down of schools for 78 weeks, because there were historic increases in violent crime committed against school-age children and committed by school-age children. So people need to wake up, and they need to wake up at the ballot box. I think they're beginning to do that. As you know, the school district lost candidates for the local school board. Most of their candidates lost. So there is at least a glimmer of hope.
Paul, the mayor went over to Diet High School, where they have 2% of tested students that can read at grade level, 2% only, and he congratulated them as a great example of a sustainable community school because their basketball team won the state championship, according to IllinoisPolicy.org. Why does he congratulate failure? And the Wall Street Journal says, as usual, in this new contract, the losers are the students. So twofold. Why does he congratulate failure, Mayor Johnson? And do you agree with the Journal that teachers and Brandon win at the expense of kids?
Yeah, well, first of all, I absolutely agree with the Journal. But let me give you a better example, and I wrote about this. And that's Hope Academy on the west side of a Christian high school founded by Bob Mazikowski. They have 300 kids. They won the state championship in basketball, too. Let me tell you, it's one of the top, it's in the top 20% of high schools in the state. It's overwhelmingly Black and Latino and low income. It's on the west side. They had a 400-student waiting list last year because now, a mile down the street is Manly High School, okay? Manly High School, a model for the Chicago Teachers Union, built for 1,200 kids. I renovated it 25 years ago when it had like 900 students. It has 76 students and 27 faculty, and I don't know if there's a single student. Maybe there's one or two of those students who are meeting standards. Imagine that, 76 kids in a high school building built for 1,200 with 27 faculty.
They just need more money and more faculty. They're almost there, Paul.
Well, look, Manly. If I had been superintendent, I would have given Hope Manly. They would have enrolled the 76 kids at Manly, who Manly High School has been failing, and they would have added hundreds of more students from the West Side who are looking at for school alternatives to the failing Chicago public schools that they've been going to.
I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that these high schools are still open. Like uptown near me, they have 52 teachers and 53 students. I mean, this is just it's not a functioning system.
Well, here's the record. Douglas High School, 32 students, is it?
Yeah.
26 faculty. Look, they literally have one-on-one staff to faculty, yet those schools are meeting proficiency. And we're going to get more of the same because they're so-called quality community schools. The sustainable community schools model is all designed to funnel more resources to schools that have significantly lost population. They're saying schools shouldn't be funded by the number of pupils they have, but they should be funded based on need. And really, that's kind of a camouflage word for what they really want to do, which is, they want to have these schools that are 20, 30, 35% capacity. They're losing capacity. They don't want them to lose staff. This is all about the protection of Chicago teacher union jobs.
All right, Paul Vallas, we're going to have to leave it here for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And you could read his works at illinoispolicy.org and also on X. So thanks, Paul, for joining us. Yeah,
and also, as you know, I'm running weekly for the Contrarian, and I've done a piece that will be out today, the Chicago Contrarian, on the Chicago Teachers Union's apartheid school system.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Paul Vallas, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago.